Okay, tonight I'm going to be talking about, well, it's a cheerful topic tonight. I'm going to be talking about female psychopaths and I guess sociopaths. And I'll sort of go back to the end of Elizabeth Holmes and the Theranos scandal. And then I'm going to get into the Epstein files. I know that's everybody's nightmare. Nobody ever wants to think about that. Anyway, I'm going to butcher this woman's name, but I've said before in several other videos that many times when there's a malignant narcissist or a sadistic perpetrator, you know, like some super bad guy, right? And they're head of a cult or they're, you know, the ringleader of an organization that exploits others, you know, whether it's sex trafficking, or in this case, you know, she would lure these young girls with, you know, Epstein's wealth and, you know, just going away for the weekend and whatever, you know. It wasn't like taking them, coercing them into a secret location or something. I mean, most of these girls knew they were going where they were going. They just did not realize what was going to happen when they got there. So my point is that a lot of times, and this also happened in the Elizabeth Smart case, is her abductor, and he took her, I think she was 14, abducted her out of her bedroom. She was sleeping in there with her little sister, to be one of his, I don't think he had that many wives, but, you know, polygamy he had. Anyway, the point is that he had a wife, and she helped with the abduction and then sort of policing her, controlling Elizabeth. I don't think she was there that first night when she was abducted, but she played a really key role in keeping her under, you know, under her security at all times, you know, like, so if he was busy prophesizing or whatever it was he does, you know, what he did, because of course, you know, he heard voices, big surprise, and he was, you know, this with God, you know. Anyway, many times in these cases, there'll be a female who is assisting the head honcho guy in recruiting the victims or whoever he decides, or, you know, she picks out for him, the victims or whatever. So she was kind of like, what's her name, Giselle Maxwell, and I'm Gabeline Maxwell. I'm not saying her first name right at all. It's a different country her name is from. But the whole point is that many times, I mean, she was called like the Madame for the Epstein files, basically, because that's what she was. She was like this social arm that would go out into the community and sort of pick out, hand select these, you know, types of young girls that, you know, Epstein wanted, and whoever else, you know, like a million names now, whatever other powerful men were involved on that island. But she also molested them as well. I don't know if she was bisexual or what, but I'm pretty sure she was Epstein's girlfriend. But yeah, she participated as well. And she had a whole grooming scenario she would run on all of them. But what I'm trying to say is this is kind of a weird thing. Like, one wouldn't think that. One would think that, like, if there was, I don't know what you want to call it, like a male, a sexual deviant overlord or whatever, who was, you know, had a private space where he wanted to bring back, have these kinds of experiences, you would think that it would just be other men involved in this sort of underage playground nightmare. But the key is there's usually a really capable, intelligent, big planner, somebody who really knows what they're doing with recruitment and has good social skills, a woman who does sort of the outreach to bring back whoever he's needing. It's like, by fulfilling his whatever weird needs, it's like she's being submissive to him, because usually these men are like, they're all like sadists, dominant, usually violent or on drugs or whatever, or just power hungry. You know, there's always something extreme about them, or they're control freaks. But it's just really interesting that they would. Nobody really thinks of, like, if you have men like sort of taking advantage of women, especially if they're underage. No one really thinks that another female would be involved in that, right? It's like, because women are considered to be more like maternal and more caring and usually less criminally minded. Though, having done jail library, I can assure you that there are plenty of women in jail for various crimes. So, but the whole point is that when I started doing research, I was like, okay, so this is coming up. You know, I noticed it in a few cases, and then I was like, why is this coming up like everywhere? Like, this is like a thing. And it's because they're strategically placed. It's kind of like a double entendre. It's like, they serve as like, almost like, I don't know how to say this, not be sick, but they're fulfilling some kind of kink that he has, to have a powerful woman being subservient to him as like the mastermind. And then that in turn is doing some kind of weird psychological thing to her, because usually these women have some kind of screwy upbringing where, you know, they have obviously they have some issues with power and control and gender issues and submission and domination, and they need to play that out with this head honcho guy, you know what I mean? And so then there's that creepy like sexual dynamic, and then underneath that is like all the victims that they end up recruiting. So it's kind of like, in a way, it's like it's a double bind, you know, because it's like he's getting, you know, some kind of bizarre psychological and sexual satisfaction out of who's doing the dirty work for him, and then of course getting the whoever he's, you know, wants to take advantage of on top of it. right? And then these women are usually part of their seduction. Like, they groom them, they prepare them, they set them up in a way so that by the time they're introduced to him or the other men in power in these scenarios, it's like they've got them buttered up, they've got them like calmed down, or like not as emotionally scared because as they would be to go to a room with strange men, or like a strange man, because they feel like there's this woman looking out for them and she knows them better and she has their best interests, and like, it's sick. It's like she's their babysitter. The whole thing's gross. But if we don't learn about these things, then we can't identify them, and therefore in our society, which runs on power and money and patriarchy, dare I say, that an exploitation of those with less, with those who have more, the power imbalances, that if we don't educate ourselves on these type of things, then we wouldn't be able to spot it, if we were to come into contact with someone who was perhaps a victim, or you know what I mean, like, we wouldn't know what was to look for, or what's going on. And Elizabeth Smart, I know for sure, she was out with at least his wife. I think he had more than one wife. When she gave a note to somebody, saying what her name was, and then she got rescued. So, what would cause a woman to do such a thing? Because, well, one, this also covers the man who's in head of this thing. It covers him because people are less going to be suspecting him of, or being able to point to him as being the criminal element, because technically he's not doing the actual work of, handpicking and transporting, and I'm tired of using this grooming over and over again, but of coercing and softening up, the people who are going to be exploited, right? So most people would not see like she was a middle-aged woman, right? Like, if she was with, a group of young girls, most people are going to think that is nothing weird going on, and consider that a normal situation. Whereas if it was like him doing it, it would be like a red flag, right? So there's that. So it's like, on that level, it really gives them a lot more access to commit these misdeeds and obviously not get caught or even suspected, right? And it adds a sort of domestic light to it, which all madams of, like, escorts, or, if there's like a woman who's in charge of a brothel house or something, like, they usually have a kind of role, almost like in like how in Annie there was like what Carol Burnett played, like the woman who was in charge of the orphan house, like somebody who's like the hen who takes care of all the little chicks, there's, and like she in that film where play, like, she's not a good person, and like most of these type of women aren't, but they are in positions of power and influence, and they have enormous influence on both parties, on who they're delivering these, you know, I don't want to keep using the word victim, but, you know, proteges, like, whatever. And also on the leader himself, because they are such a direct line to his subversive activities that there can be no way that they're not sort of deeply connected. Sorry. So there's that too. She has not been diagnosed as like a for sure psychopath clinically. She has a lot of attributes, however, that would lend itself to that for certain. For example, her history, her background, I looked it all up, and it's like she grew up with a very tyrannical father who was kind of a sadistic person himself, and he like did not have any empathy. He only worked in a sort of transactional mindset toward literally everybody. He treated people as subservient to him, and though she was kind of the apple of his eye, he had other children, but she was his favorite, and he named like his boat after her. Yeah, Ghislaine, I can't pronounce her name, G-H-I-S Laney Maxwell, British socialite, convicted in the U.S. for crimes connected to Jeffrey Epstein. So, of course, they did say that her psychopathic traits, deception, manipulation, grooming, exploitation, callousness is the main one, I think. Callousness in regard to treating other people's suffering as, you know, just part of the plot, you know, not something that you need to concern yourself with, like other people's feelings, even children's or young adolescents, you know, that is how they feel about what's happening. That's it's not something it's not like feelings they have that they're suppressing or, you know, shoving down and not feeling, you know, turning off, like, you know, disassociating or just acting cold, or it's like they don't actually have whatever mechanism in their brain chemistry to have those feelings in the first place. So they're not suppressing anything. It doesn't exist. It's not there, you know? So, and that's almost always a characteristic of at least malignant narcissism, if not, you know, in the psychopathic analysis as well. Lack of apparent remorse, behavior that can appear emotionally detached. That's what I was just talking about. From the harm caused. When I say dissociation, I'm just more, you know, talking about a temporary dissociation. I'm talking about somebody who would be completely out of it. Because to be able to do this kind of recruitment she's doing, she would have to be, you know, really functional, highly functional person in society who can easily maneuver. You know, they're flying on planes and, you know, going around in various social circles, sort of finding these girls. So somebody who has social charm, charismatic, or at least engaging, or able to elicit some kind of feeling in whoever they're speaking with that it's semi-protective, or at least somebody who, when topics of money or bringing up material goods in a way that, there has to be a certain kind of finesse to be able to talk about things that are illegal in a way that is not sounding illegal, that's sounding more like a good time or a party. It takes a certain kind of person to be socially capable of putting that in like a verbal package that someone could receive that would not frighten them or make them nervous, because these are young girls, as young as 14. So it's not like they have a lot of experience. They're, I guess, in some way easy to manipulate, but on the other hand, if you're trying to get a minor to go somewhere with you overnight or something, or it's gonna be a hard sell. So whoever's doing it's got to be highly skilled at what they're doing. She, like I said, transactional relationships. She, of course, treated relationships as a way to obtain status, material wealth, to look a certain way, to elicit a kind of power and a belonging. So there is no DSM-5. I've said this in other videos. There is no DSM-5 category that's psychopathy or sociopaths. They're housed under antisocial personality disorder. So that's kind of the umbrella term that gets used as a formal diagnosis if you have these kinds of lack of apparent remorse is one of the categories of it, which is pretty self-explanatory. But somebody who not only doesn't have empathy for whoever they're exploiting, but also doesn't feel guilt or shame or anxiety. A true psychopath doesn't even, like, if they're taking a lie detector test, they literally don't sweat. They can pass it brilliantly. They do not have, I don't know if it's because of their brain chemistry or just genetically, they don't have all the same kind of physical reactions that we have, that we like an average person would have. They're missing that, this is a silly example, but let's say I'm driving a little fast and I look behind me and I see there's a police car not coming after me, but there is somebody in the lane behind me. Immediately, I'm going to feel guilty. I'm going to feel nervous. I'm going to start, maybe, I won't say sweating, but it's I'm going to feel a prickly sensation on the back of my neck. I'm going to feel uncomfortable and nervous, and, my heart's probably racing. I'm probably sweating a little, or flushed at least. I'm having somatic presentation from the anxiety of am I going to get a ticket, or are they going to pull me over, or did I get caught doing something wrong, all those things. But if I was a psychopath, I wouldn't have any of that. That wouldn't be happening. So in a way, it explains a lot, because it's a lot of times when these people do get caught, and especially when they're in the courtroom before a judge and jury, it's it's a bizarre process where sometimes they're hard to catch or convict because they don't respond to the same stimuli that the average person would. The average person is going to have like a physical reaction to a behavior that they have exhibited that's kind of antisocial, or in a way it's going to get them called out or embarrassed, shamed, you know, their freedom taken away, you know, like that's like a big clue if the person is. And I mean, this is well documented that it's crazy story. All right, so what was I gonna say about her dad? Okay, her father, sorry, my lips are chapped. Her dad was very wealthy, and he was like kind of a business mogul, and like I said, he was very abusive and to everybody and forceful, and the only way he could really have a relationship with her was there was like he dominated over her, and like she wasn't allowed to play with friends, and like, you know, he was real strict with her, and he like really tried to have a tight rein on her, and she in turn, you know, was a classic codependent where she kind of like almost like, I don't want to say ate it up, but you know what I mean, like she responded to that dynamic in her own sort of fawning display of affection back. And it was like a push-pull, but it was all she knew of love. Like that's her first experience with kind of having male-female role exhibited to her, a relationship. And yeah, it's obviously screwed her up. He ended up passing away early. I can't remember how. I mean, early, like in his early 60s or something. But when he died, the family found out that his whole business had been a bust. Like he was like running on fumes. Like it was not anything that he wasn't as rich as he was telling everybody. So it's like, not only did she have to deal with the death of her father, but he all their status, money, everything was in shambles, you know, because it turned out he had been lying for years and years and hiding assets. And I don't know if he had I don't know if he had a gambling problem or what his deal was, or he was just bad with finances, but it threw her, obviously, because she was really addicted to kind of the high roller lifestyle, and especially social circles and upper echelon bourgeoisie circles. So when she lost that, it's like a huge loss. It was a big problem, because it was part of her identity. And somebody who has, if she was psychopathic, I don't know, or maybe she wasn't just narcissistic, but someone like that is gonna have extreme will be extremely affected by not having external validation and other people sort of feeding into them, like complimenting them, praising them, like, you know, like a bunch of yes men who like really feed their ego and like tell them what they want to hear, you know, so they need that. And it's like, if that's suddenly taken away, because when you're nobody and you don't have money, or you can't go to all these, you know, you're not getting invited to things anymore because you don't have the money, you know, it's like she felt cut off from her lifestyle, from everything she knew. And that is when she met Jeffrey Epstein. That's the whole point of this. So, of course, we all know Jeffrey Epstein is like, I don't know if he was a millionaire or a billionaire, but he had lots of money. That is Long Island, for Christ's sake. So, once that was a relationship, had the foundation for it, he easily slipped into the role of sort of her surrogate father, because of course he is also a sadistic man, loves to play that dynamic of sort of having her under his thumb and controlling her, but at the same time she's kind of like this powerhouse female mogul who can do all these operations on her own. You know, she's planning all this on her own. It's not like he's telling her how to recruit and run all this. It's like she's like a mini mastermind. That's why these women are so tricky, because it's like, who would ever think, you know, like they're doing these things that are like so feeding into misogyny, and like they're feeding into this system that actually, like, if they weren't in a position of power, they would be a victim of themselves. So the whole thing's kind of like a bad joke, right? Because it's like, what, do you even understand what's going on here? Like, this is like not what people envision when they think of like women. And so, of course, these women, it's harder to catch them, it's harder to convict them, it's harder to keep them within a convicted sentence that's the same length as a man, even, because women are treated differently. Women are given, you know, a lot more leeway, especially in terms of violence or sexuality. There are, you know, very few female, like, pedophile, you know, like, it's just not a thing. So, but apparently this is. So, I think that's all I'm going to say about them. We all pretty much know what happened with the Epstein case. I'll go back to Elizabeth Holmes, and then I'll probably be out of time. I did almost want to talk a little bit about Anna Delphi, who I think the documentary about her is called Inventing Anna. I might have had that wrong, but she was a German from Germany, a young woman in her early 20s who claimed that she was a German heiress who was about to come into, you know, at a certain age, she was going to come into a certain amount of money from her father. And so she ended up living in a $500 a night hotel in New York City for like months, and coming up with this business plan that I can't even remember how long the plan was. It was like, I feel like the proposal was almost 40 pages or something, but it's like she came up with this document called, I can't remember, the Anna Delvey Foundation. That's not her real last name, that's just the name she made up for herself. But she had this whole hotel like wrapped around her fingers, where she kept charging everything to the room, like all her meals and drinks, and she was well known for taking people out on the town to get them to like her, and to sort of create that social circle of like people in the know and who had, again, money and status. And this keeps coming up, it's like an ongoing theme, but it's like, how she got away with this for months, I've seen the documentary, and even, well, I don't think it's a documentary, it's like a film, like, with actors. It's like, how do you get away with that for as long as she did, you know, without actually putting real capital down? Or maybe she had money at the beginning, just enough to, like, get her to the point where they trusted her, and then after that, you know, it's like, well, I'm waiting for a wire from my father, blah, blah, blah. And the way from what I've learned about it, the way she lived, absolutely nobody would question. It's kind of the same thing that happens with Elizabeth Holmes, in that it's like these women think that if they dress the part, you know, they look a certain way, they talk a certain way, they have the right buzzwords, they, you know, they're drinking the Kool-Aid, and, you know, Elizabeth Holmes is talking about how she's the, you know, she's so proud because she's the next Steve Jobs, and it's such an honor, whatever, you know, she's wearing the black turtleneck and, you know, the whole thing. But it's like they embody who they say they are. They take over, like they act as if they already are that. Like they believe their own lies to the extent that they are able to even more eloquently imprint on the world the image they want to project, right? So Anna Delvey, the way she would dress and act, and she always was shopping and, you know, just wearing designer label, like the way she lived, it was like she lived and looked and acted like somebody who had money. So it's kind of like the more she put herself out there like that, it's like the more favor she got of people believing her story, like, yeah, that she's a wealthy young heiress, you know, she's deserving of all of our attention, and, you know, people treated her like a celebrity. But of course it turned out to be a big scam, and it's insane. She ends up taking not just her best friend, but somebody running a camera because she wanted to have a documentary about her starting her company, and they took their fitness trainer, and she went to like the most expensive hotel. I can't remember if it's in like Morocco or somewhere in the Middle East, and of course she's charging everything, but it's like you're not a wealthy celebrity, but yet you've got your, you know, mini staff of people that she supposedly was paying for everything. But then it turned out she, you know, some dumb thing about her wallet, you know, was in one of the suitcases that was already on board a plane, whatever, and the suitcase got lost. And so of course she asked a friend of hers to cover her with her credit card, and it's like, and then the shit show begins, you know.